Yo, what's up? Oaghaji here. Just got back from Frisbee Park playing basketball and got myself a dub, with a layup and a hook shot, playing good defense. So I'm here now for another review for y'all, and today's review is going to be on the seventh story arc in the Kinnikuman manga series created by Takashi Shimada and Yoshinori Nakai, also known by their pen name Yudetamago. And it's the 21st Chōjin Olympics arc, and it features a lot of iconic characters, especially ones that are going to be recurring later on in the series, like Wolfman, aka Rikishi Man, in the anime adaptation, Brocken Jr., Warsman, Pentagon, Benki Man, Q Man, Mind Puzzle Man, King Cobra, and a couple of other characters, you know what I'm saying? But the most would be Brocken Jr., Pentagon, and Warsman, because especially in the case of Brocken Jr., since he has to score to sell with Ramen Man, but we're gonna talk about that, in a minute. But first, I'm gonna say that it picks off right after the second Kaiju Extermination arc, which is split into like two arcs, like the Bimi Ba arc and the Planet Raka arc. You know what I'm saying? Which is like two story arcs after the American Tour arc. Which includes which is basically two arcs, and what I'm saying, 5 and 6. Anyway, without further ado, let's begin. Now, this picks off after the fifth and sixth story arcs in the manga, which is Bimi Ba and Planet Raka, all combined to be the second Kaiju Extermination arc. The Chōjin Olympics is called the Chōjin Olympics: The Big Fight. It's going to feature a lot of new, Chōjin along the way, you know what I'm saying? Especially Brocken Jr., who appeared in the Planet Raka arc, you know what I'm saying? But anyways, as usual, all the Chōjin are competing, in races and strength competition and all that before getting to the main event, which is, the pro wrestling, you know what I'm saying? And we get some pretty, iconic matches along the way, like especially with Ramen Man versus Brocken Jr. especially. Their fight is a long time coming since Brocken Jr. wants to avenge the death of his father, Brocken Man. And Ramen Man lets Brocken Jr., attack him, wanting Brocken Jr. to get his revenge. But he stopped and decided to, fight back since, what I'm saying, he felt like, Brocken Jr. is not there yet, especially to avenge his father. Brocken Jr. didn't like that, but Ramen decided to live some kick-ass, techniques, kung fu techniques, and defeats him with the Great Wall of China move, you know what I'm saying? And he tells Brocken Jr. to let go of his hatred and forget about his father and forget about avenging his father so he become even stronger. Later on, he would, Ramen Man would visit the grave of Brocken Man, and Brocken Jr. will try to fight him again. But he sees the spirit of his father, and he cries and whatnot. But you know what I'm saying, and I want to say more into that, but again, spoilers, so I'm gonna leave it at that. Suffice to say that Ramen Man and Brocken Jr. were able to bury the hatchet, so to speak, even though Ramen Man will succumb to some injuries due to that fight. And then we have Kinnikuman versus King Cobra, and it's a pretty funny little fight, I will say, especially just as much as Kinnikuman's fight against Binky Man, aka Urinal Man. You know what I'm saying? And it's pretty cool. Not to mention you have, the Mind Puzzle Man and all that other stuff, which is cool, funny. And then we got Warsman versus Teacup Man, and Warsman is a beast, you know what I'm saying? Especially with his, Ring Man, Barracuda, you know what I'm saying, who seems a little bit familiar, but we'll get into that in a little bit. He has this fight with Teacup Man, and then later on against the mighty Pentagon that represent America. You know what I'm saying? And Warsman's from Russia, so, the Soviet Russia, it's basically the Cold War in pro wrestling form. But that their fight ends in a brutal finish with Warsman putting foot into Pentagon's ass. But don't get it twisted. Pentagon put up a very valiant fight. He was definitely that guy in that fight, but Warsman was the better fighter in that match. What else I want to talk about? Oh, Terry Mann decided to disqualify himself after saving the life of a puppy, showing that, he's a true hero, a true Justice Chōjin. You know what I'm saying? Which is cool. I forgot to mention that. What else I want to talk about before I get into the finale of the arc with Kinnikuman and Warsman? Let me see. We get to, the fight between Kinnikuman and Wolfman, who will have his names changed to Rikishi Man in the anime adaptation, like I said earlier, due to, copyright and things of that nature, especially since, there's this horror movie character, the Wolfman. Anyway, they have their fight, and Suguru was able to, beat, Wolfman, even though it was a pretty awesome fight. And then Ramen Man and Warsman will have their fight, and man, Ramen Man definitely put up a great fight against Warsman, but Warsman, he was a beast, he was a brutal Chōjin, and especially a robo Chōjin, you know what I'm saying, fighting computer. And, it was a brutal fight, and that's more I gotta say because, especially with his bear claw and Ramen Man's brain, it's like, man, it was brutal. What else? And then, Kinnikuman was a little nervous at first to fight Warsman, but after, saw what happened with Ramen Man and Ramen Man touches his hand, it definitely inspired Kinnikuman to man up and say, I'm going to fight Warsman. For not just for himself, but also for Ramen Man, his fellow, Chōjin, what I'm saying, which is pretty beautiful. I also forgot to mention that Bimaba is living with Suguru and Meat now in the after the previous arc. But anyways, let's move on. It's the final fight between Kinnikuman and Warsman, and man, this is the epitome of manly manga fights. You know what I'm saying? It's a manga that because man. It was a brutal fight. It wasn't an easy fight for Suguru at all because Warsman, he's a robo Chōjin and he has that bear claw and whatnot. It was brutal. And then along this fight, we get to find out that Barracuda is Robin Mask, wanting to settle the score with Kinnikuman, but with Warsman, after he found Warsman and Sophia Russell being trained by a very powerful, ruthless wrestling organization that trains the most brutalist of Chōjin, you know what I'm saying? And, which is cool, and then we get the Kinnikuman unleashing his burning inner strength, while with Warsman using the power special on him. After using that burning inner strength, he was able to unleash the Kinniku Buster on him, which is an awesome move, you know what I'm saying? Before he did that, though, we get to find out that Warsman decided to rebel against Robin Mask and decided to have a good, clean fight, against Kinnikuman, which is pretty awesome. So Kinnikuman was able to win the match, and then we get a little bit of Warsman's backstory, and, everything's all well and good, and, Kinnikuman and Robin Mask were able to, make amends and things like that, become, friends again, which is awesome. So that's the basis of the story arc, in this manga, because, this video is getting even longer already, since it's like 9 minutes and 32 seconds. Overall, this is a great story arc with some awesome writing, you know what I'm saying? It's a great step up to the previous 2 arcs, Bimiba and Planet Raka, also known as the Second Kaiju Extermination arc, you know what I'm saying? And in terms of the storytelling, the characters, the action and the art keeps getting better and better, you know what I'm saying, with each chapter in the arc, which I definitely love, you know what I'm saying, and we get some great, you know, moments in the story arc, which will stand the test of time, in my opinion. And Shimada and Nakai definitely did their thing with this arc. I definitely say it's definitely one of my favorite story arcs in the Kinnikuman manga, for sure, you feel me? So, overall, the 21st Chōjin Olympics arc is an awesome story arc. I highly recommend it for y'all. This arc gets a 5 out of 5. Hopefully y'all enjoy this review, despite a little bit of hiccups here and there, like the brain farts and whatnot, and this review dragging very long, you know what I'm saying, being long-winded and shit. But hey, it happens, you know what I'm saying, because there's a lot to talk about this manga, but at the same time, I'm trying not to spoil it. Anyway, let me know what y'all think about the 21st Chōjin Olympics arc in the Kinnikuman manga series in the comments below if you read it already. Y'all can hit that like button if you like the video. Y'all can subscribe to the channel for more content. Hit that bell to keep y'all notified of uploads. Y'all can also follow me on my other social media accounts and stay tuned for more other reviews and more other videos along the way. So with all that said, y'all, it's your boy, Ogechi Aghaji, aka Oaghaji, aka the Pervy Sensei, signing out. Peace.